Seth Stoughton was a police officer for 5 years, then left for the calmer confines of academia. He's now a law professor at the University of South Carolina, where he spent the last 3 years studying how the police use force.
The warrior culture, the warrior mindset, the belief that police officers are soldiers engaged in battle with the criminal element. That mindset and the training has really contributed to some shootings that were most likely avoidable.
He says this warrior mindset doesn't begin on day one of police academy. It starts well before that.
This is the Orange County Sheriff's Academy. You have 6 months to get it right.
It starts in police recruitment videos that show officers shooting rifles, strapping on hard body armor, using force, tackling, foot sweeping people, using police dogs. That represents a fairly small minority of police encounters, but it's used in these recruitment videos to represent the norm. So that attracts a particular type of candidate, and the police academy further entrenches this idea of the police warrior.
And how does it do that?
It teaches officers to be afraid by telling them that policing is an incredibly dangerous profession, to assume that everyone around them is a threat until proven otherwise. And I want to emphasize that. Officers are trained to view every encounter as a potential deadly force incident.
So give us an idea of some of the scenarios that you might be taught or worked through when you're a new recruit.
You walk up to a person who is loitering outside of a convenience store. Their hands are in their pockets. You, as the officer, begin talking to them, and without saying a word, they pull a gun out of their pocket and begin shooting you.
I wonder if you can quantify this for us and give us a sense of how many hours of training will be spent working through these kind of scenarios.
An average of about 60 hours on deadly force, that is the use of firearms, and an average of just over 60 hours on self-defense. Compare that to de-escalation conflict resolution training. The average there is only 8 hours of training, and most of that is in a classroom.
So when officers are faced with unpredictable situations, they'll fall back on their physical skills, he says, ones they're more comfortable with. It's what some say happened in the case of Eric Garner, the black, unarmed man selling cigarettes outside a shop. Officers approached. Eric Garner was abusive. They put him in a chokehold, and he died soon after.
That's one example of the difference between de-escalation and a harder approach that the officers used more quickly than perhaps they needed to.
Seth Stoughton says this warrior cop mentality developed in the 70s.
The warrior mindset originally was quite limited. It instructed officers that to survive a life-and-death encounter, they had to have mental tenacity, determination, the sheer grit to will themselves to live, to will themselves to survive. That was referred to as the warrior mindset. Gradually, that began to shift from a mindset that officers had to have in the worst-case situations to a mindset that officers were being taught to adopt all the time.
And do you know why?
Every encounter. I think it's a combination of high-profile incidents where officers were killed and the refusal to accept any officer fatalities as inherent to the job, essentially. So when the military is designing a mission, they have in mind the fact that they're going to lose soldiers, that every military mission has costs, and you pay those costs in part in human life. The police culture, the police profession, has strongly repudiated that notion. No officer fatalities are acceptable.
It's as though, over the past few decades, a calculation has been made by American cops. that civilian deaths are an acceptable price to pay for no police deaths. So why are US cops killing unarmed black men? Imagine a street in a black neighbourhood with poverty and crime. A cop turns up to deal with a tense situation involving a black man. The cop's unconscious bias leads him to view that man as a threat, and as the situation deteriorates, his warrior cop training kicks in. He shoots. But former Officer Stoughton says it doesn't have to be this way.
New Mexico has a fairly high number of civilians killed by police annually. The New Mexico Police Academy, which is the single largest training institution in New Mexico, the academy director there has stressed that officers should use force liberally. They shouldn't hesitate. They should err on the side of police violence rather than de-escalation. That obviously affects the way that officers do their jobs. If you look at other states where the police academy has adopted contrary expectations and a contrary message, you see police officers using deadly force far less often.
And do we have any idea then of how many lives could be saved if more states adopted that approach?
If all of the states had the same approach and the same numbers of officer-involved homicides as the best states, the states that had the fewest, we could expect about 300 to 600 lives to be saved every year.